In the stillness of a late summer night, the quiet village of Camzhou lay nestled among the misty hills of Gansu Province, China. Its narrow stone streets, illuminated only by soft lantern light, whispered of a peaceful life untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But beneath this serene facade, a dark secret was waiting to shatter the village's calm, a secret that would haunt the residents for years to come. Zhou, a 17-year-old girl known for her gentle spirit and dedication at the local noodle shop, stepped out to the public restroom just beyond the shop's entrance. The dim glow of the lantern barely pierced the narrow alley's darkness. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence, sharp, desperate, and filled with terror. It sliced through the night like a blade, drawing the attention of all nearby. The villagers, roused from their sleep, paused in fear. What horror could have invaded their peaceful home? Lanterns flickered as people peered cautiously from their windows and doorways. At the heart of the alley, behind the noodle shop, lay a scene too gruesome to comprehend. Zhou, barely conscious, her body cruelly mutilated in an act of unimaginable violence. Most shocking of all was the sight of her intestines, torn from her body and twisted grotesquely around her neck. A brutal signature that left the village reeling in horror. The noodle shop owner, an older woman with decades of quiet strength, rushed to her aid, her heart pounding as she witnessed the unimaginable cruelty inflicted on the young girl. Word spread quickly through the village, turning what was once a haven of peace into a place gripped by fear and suspicion. The questions mounted: who could commit such a horrendous act? This was not an isolated incident. Barely a month earlier, another young woman was found murdered in the same terrifying manner nearby. The pattern of gun extraction left investigators baffled and villagers terrified. Emergency responders rushed Zhou to the local hospital. Her survival was a beacon of hope amid the growing shadow of dread. Yet the village's questions only deepened. What kind of person could commit such atrocities? The community's fear transformed into a restless unease. No one felt safe, and whispers of a lurking monster spread, eroding the bonds of trust that had long held the village together. The local police struggled to find clues. No witnesses had seen the attacker, and the brutality suggested someone both cruel and methodical, a predator hiding in plain sight. With the village shrouded in fear and mystery, a haunting question lingered in every mind: who was capable of such evil, and what drove them to tear apart innocent lives under the cover of darkness? As the lanterns dimmed and the night deepened, one truth remained clear: this nightmare was far from over. And the village of Camzhou awaited answers that seemed ever out of reach. As news of the brutal attacks spread, the local police found themselves overwhelmed by fear and the complexity of the case. They reached out for help to a man known across Gansu Province, Zhou, a seasoned criminal investigator with a reputation for solving the unsolvable. Zhou was no ordinary investigator. His mind was sharp as a blade, his intuition honed by years tracking elusive criminals through the labyrinth of China's rural and urban shadows. Upon arrival in Camzhou, Zhou walked silently through the village, sensing the weight of dread that clung to its narrow streets and weathered rooftops, a heaviness that no lantern could dispel. He listened carefully to the local officers' briefings, fragmented facts, frightened testimonies, and the haunting details of the mutilations. Each piece painted a terrifying portrait of cruelty, yet some threads seemed puzzlingly out of place. Zhou's experience taught him that in the darkest crimes, it was often the smallest details, overlooked by many, that illuminated the truth. His eyes searched beyond the obvious, probing the psychology behind the brutality. Psychologically, the removal of the victim's intestines suggested a killer driven by rage and a desire for absolute control, a twisted assertion of power over life and death. But why such a brutal ritual? Zhou pondered whether the killer sought to send a message, one rooted in deep personal pain, anger, or revenge tied to the intimate circle of the victims. Zhou's intuition led him to suspect the perpetrator was someone familiar with the village, someone who knew the victims and the rhythms of this close-knit community. Back at the station, Zhou pored over witness statements, looking for inconsistencies, hesitations, or the faintest hint of hidden truths beneath layers of fear and loyalty. He knew fear could silence the innocent and shield the guilty. The psychological web in this village was tangled with secrets, old resentments, and unspoken tensions. Zhou's approach was patient and methodical. He sought to build trust with the villagers, gently coaxing out hidden fears and carefully observing human reactions. Each conversation, each pause, and each fleeting glance became a clue. Zhou understood that beneath the surface of rural harmony lay currents of tension, perhaps even silent grudges. The killer's boldness, striking in a familiar place, leaving behind a ritualistic mutilation, spoke of a fractured mind, yet one carefully hiding in plain sight, blending with the rhythms of village life. Zhou reflected on the deeper societal layers at play: poverty, stigma around mental health, and the pressures of traditional expectations that often suffocate and isolate the vulnerable. To solve this case, Zhou knew, he had to pierce not just the physical evidence, but the psychological walls shielding a disturbed soul. The question remained: how does one unmask a killer who wears the mask of normalcy? And what ghosts from the past drove them to such unspeakable acts? As the investigation deepened, the village held its breath, caught between fear and hope, waiting for the shadows to finally be chased away by the light of truth. But in a place where every face is known, every secret can cut deep, could the truth be stranger and more painful than anyone dared imagine? The shadows that haunted Zhou were not just those of nightfall, but those cast by human hearts broken by despair, anger, and silence. And so began the long journey, a quest to unravel a mystery woven tightly with blood, betrayal, and the haunting echoes of the human soul. Zhou Quoc crossed the threshold of the Wan family's humble home, a place now saturated with the weight of unspeakable tragedy. The usual warmth of the wooden beams and paper windows had been replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint echo of his footsteps. The living room bore the raw aftermath of violence. Mr. Wan's lifeless body sprawled unnaturally across the floor, blood pooling beneath him in dark, irregular patterns. Each wound told a brutal story of a struggle cut short, a life extinguished without mercy. In the adjoining kitchen, the air hung heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Mrs. Zhang, the daughter-in-law, was discovered near the hearth, her body collapsed on cold tiled flooring, a stark contrast to the homey space that once pulsed with daily life. What struck Zhou most was the eerie preservation of order amidst chaos. No belongings had been ransacked, valuables untouched. It was clear the attacker sought not material gain but something far more personal, a dark vendetta cloaked in violence. His gaze fell on a small plastic bag carelessly left on the kitchen floor, a modest parcel of pickled mustard greens. It seemed inconsequential at first glance, but to Zhou, it was a deliberate sign, a breadcrumb left behind by a perpetrator tangled in familiarity and haste. Pickled mustard greens, a staple of rural Chinese kitchens, an everyday comfort and symbol of home. How could such a humble item now anchor the twisted narrative of murder and betrayal? Ngos' mind raced with questions. Who among the family or close associates would have left such a token behind? Was this a careless mistake or a message wrapped in the guise of simplicity? Tracing the trail, Ngo noticed a thin, deliberate path of blood droplets leading from the kitchen to the living room. The killer moved with chilling care, avoiding noise, navigating the home like a ghost intent on destruction but wary of detection. The weapon was identified as an agricultural cleaver, a tool common in these parts but wielded here with lethal intent. Not a refined weapon, but enough to inflict brutal, merciless wounds in a sudden eruption of violence. The absence of preparation suggested a crime of passion, driven by rage and desperation rather than cold calculation, a man pushed beyond limits, wielding whatever was at hand in a frenzied act. These clues painted a chilling portrait, a killer intimately acquainted with the household's rhythm, who understood its quiet moments and vulnerabilities, someone close, or at least trusted. Ngo considered the paradox of trust in small villages, a fragile bond that binds and blinds, capable of concealing resentments and secrets beneath a veneer of neighborly goodwill. Meticulous in his approach, Ngo combed through every inch of the home. Even the smallest detail, a misplaced object, a faint smudge, might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. The killer's precision in erasing fingerprints and footprints revealed a disturbing level of experience, a deliberate effort to vanish without trace, like a shadow dissolving into night. The thought struck Ngo: here lived a man or woman accustomed to slipping through cracks, to living unseen even among those closest to them. But beyond who, Ngo pondered the deeper question: what drove this individual to such darkness? Hatred, betrayal, desperation, or something even more complex? In the faint clues left behind, Ngo sought not just justice, but understanding, a glimpse into fractured souls and the human fragility beneath monstrous acts. This was no ordinary case, it was a painful journey through broken families, silent betrayals, and wounds no eye could see. In this serene landscape, darkness had nestled within smiles and greetings, yet Ngo sensed the fragile light of truth beginning to break the silence. When a home transforms into a scene of horror, what unseen stories linger behind its closed doors? On the surface, the Wan family seemed a picture of harmony, a respected household known throughout the village for tradition and cohesion. But beneath the calm, subtle fissures cracked wide open. Mr. Wan, the family patriarch, carried an aura of stern authority, a man bound by duty, fiercely protective of the family's reputation amidst the watchful eyes of neighbors. Mrs. Zhang, the daughter-in-law, was known for her quiet strength and diligence, yet the burdens she bore in silence, especially in her fraught relationship with her mother-in-law, revealed a less visible side of family life. Then there was Ban Miaji, the son-in-law, a man wrestling with debts piling high, suffocating pressure, and the thin line between loyalty and simmering resentment. To the village, Ban appeared close and accepted, yet within his heart raged storms of anger and desperation few could see. Ngo understood that the tightest bonds often conceal the deepest wounds, tensions bubbling beneath everyday exchanges, waiting to ignite. Ban had borrowed money from Mrs. Zhang, a desperate act of survival rather than greed, but the weight of the debt became an invisible noose tightening with every passing day. Yet financial strain was only part of the story. Beneath lay a battle of duty versus failure, hope slipping into despair, emotions too complex for simple explanations. The Wan family, though admired, held secrets wrapped in silence, whispers of pain and fractures hidden from the village's eyes. Relatives and neighbors came forward with testimonies, each perspective adding layers of truth and ambiguity to the portrait of the family. Ban vehemently denied any involvement in the murders, yet his fraught exchanges with family members betrayed growing tensions beneath his denials. Interviews revealed cracks in his composure, inconsistent stories, darting eyes, and over-defensive reactions that hinted at concealed truths. Zhou recognized these signs, hallmarks of offenders gripped by complex psychological turmoil, where guilt and fear collide in chaotic confession and denial. In rural communities, pressures to save face, avoid shame, and silence scandal weigh heavily, often at the cost of truth and healing. These societal constraints created a breeding ground for hidden dangers, where violent undercurrents could fester in plain sight. Within this intricate web, the pressing question persisted: were family strife and societal pressure the spark for tragedy? And could justice unveil these shadows? With his profound understanding of human nature and society, Zhou pieced together a broader picture, motives emerging from fragments, truth edging closer. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but the flickering light of truth glimmered faintly at the tunnel's end. Could familial love overcome the darkness? Or would the relentless tragedy continue, leaving wounds too deep to heal? The answer lay buried in forgotten memories and the hearts of those left behind, scars not yet healed. As dawn broke over the sleepy village, the investigation team arrived, knowing that each moment was critical to untangling the web of this cruel tragedy. Detectives moved methodically through the crime scenes, examining every corner, every shadow for clues that might reveal the killer's identity. Though the physical evidence was sparse, one detail stood out starkly: the peculiar presence of a tied plastic bag of pickled vegetables beneath the kitchen floor. This seemingly innocent item became a pivotal clue, pointing to someone intimately familiar with the household's daily life and habits. Interviews with neighbors and relatives revealed a tangle of conflicting stories, each colored by fear, loyalty, or concealed grudges. Among those questioned, Ban Moko, the beleaguered son-in-law, stood out not just for his financial troubles but for his increasingly erratic behavior under scrutiny. His initial denials gradually gave way to a hesitant recounting of his relationship with the family, a mixture of gratitude, obligation, and simmering resentment. Detective Ngo Kwokton observed these exchanges with a keen eye, noting subtle shifts in body language, hesitation, and the burden of unspoken fears. The investigation also uncovered tensions not visible on the surface: old family disputes, whispered rumors, and unaddressed debts that gnawed at the edges of their lives. Forensic tests began to connect dots. The blood traces on the suspect's clothing matched those at the scene, and DNA evidence aligned with the victims. Yet, the defense challenged the integrity of these findings, arguing contamination and the fallibility of forensic methods, sowing seeds of doubt in the courtroom. Tu Ho's testimony, given under immense trauma, became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, but also a source of controversy regarding the reliability of memories under duress. Behind the scenes, tension simmered between law enforcement eager for resolution, families desperate for justice, and a community caught in a storm of fear and suspicion. Ngo Kwokton's sharp reasoning helped navigate these turbulent waters, carefully weighing evidence against emotion, logic against cultural nuance. The investigation revealed how deeply intertwined personal histories and societal expectations were in shaping the events leading to this brutal crime. As new leads emerged, the question loomed: would truth and justice prevail over fear, denial, and the silent fractures within this fractured family? The case was far from over, but each revelation brought the investigators closer to the heart of darkness hidden beneath the surface. Could the bonds of blood and history withstand the unraveling of secrets long buried, or would the cracks widen into irreversible ruin? In this intricate dance of truth and deception, one thing was certain: the path to justice was paved with more than facts, it was laden with human pain and resilience. What would the next step reveal, and who would stand to lose or gain when the final curtain fell? To grasp the horror behind Qiu Qianquo's acts, one must look beyond the crime scenes and into the depths of a mind shaped by trauma, neglect, and relentless inner turmoil. His childhood, marked by deprivation and emotional abandonment, forged a fractured psyche, one that wrestled continuously with rage, loneliness, and a desperate craving for control. Addiction, both a refuge and a curse, clouded Qiu's judgment and magnified his darkest impulses, fueling violent outbursts that alienated him from the few who cared. The brutal mutilations were more than acts of rage, they were symbolic expressions of power over a life otherwise marked by helplessness and frustration. Psychological experts identified traits consistent with borderline personality disorder marked by intense emotional instability, fear of abandonment, and an impaired sense of self. The toxic maternal relationship loomed large, a complicated mix of dependency, control, and blurred boundaries that fueled Qiu's emotional fragmentation. Within the conservative rural society, mental health struggles often remain unspoken, wrapped in stigma and silence, leaving wounds to fester unseen. His violent acts were a terrifying externalization of a psyche overwhelmed by abandonment, shame, and a desperate need for recognition, even if through fear. Such crimes remind us how untreated mental illness, compounded by poverty and social neglect, can spiral into acts of irreversible destruction. Qiu's resistance to early help reflected a common tragedy where those who suffer most are also those least able to seek or receive aid. Experts argue that violence can become a distorted language for pain that finds no other outlet, an anguished scream that shatters not just victims but entire communities. Yet understanding these roots is not to excuse but to illuminate the urgent need for mental health awareness, intervention, and compassionate social support. This case exposes how systemic gaps, lack of resources, stigma, and neglect can create fertile ground for tragedy to take root and grow. Qiu Qianquo's fractured mind became a dark mirror reflecting not only his personal torment but also collective societal failure. In the silent spaces between crime and punishment lies a plea for healing, for understanding, and for a future where such darkness is met not with fear, but with hope. As the dust settles over Camzhou, we face the silent echoes of lives shattered, a haunting reminder that behind every tragedy lies unseen pain and missed opportunities for healing. Families broken by violence carry invisible wounds, scars etched deep into hearts and memories, often concealed beneath the facade of daily life. The story of Qiu Qianquo compels us to confront difficult truths about mental health stigma, social neglect, and the urgent need for compassionate intervention in marginalized communities. Violence, devastating as it is, often signals deeper fractures, cries from souls lost in isolation, struggling against shadows unseen by society. To break cycles of suffering, communities must nurture awareness, dismantle stigma, and expand access to mental health care, especially in rural regions where silence often prevails. Education and open dialogue hold the power to dissolve barriers, encouraging those who suffer to seek help before despair takes root. Each of us carries a responsibility to listen with empathy, recognize signs of distress, and extend a hand free of judgment and fear. Though Kiu Qian Kwok's crimes are unforgivable, understanding their roots challenges us to seek healing over mere condemnation. In a culture valuing harmony, acknowledging and addressing pain is the foundation of true peace and resilience. Let this story be a solemn reminder: silence around suffering only deepens wounds and isolates those most in need. We must foster communities where speaking out is safe and support is accessible, transforming hope from distant dream to lived reality. To families still healing, to those unheard and unseen, your pain matters. You are not alone, and your voices deserve to be heard. We invite you, our viewers, to join this vital conversation, to raise awareness, foster empathy, and champion change in the shadows of silence. Thank you for walking this difficult path with us. Together, through compassion and understanding, we can build safer, kinder communities. And now, as this story fades into memory, one question remains for all of us: how will we ensure that such tragedies become stories of the past, and that hope becomes the legacy we leave behind?